What is it that people are seeing? Is it a man? An animal? A myth? Or something else? Are they delusional? Are they lying? Some are pastors. Some are law enforcement. Some are military. If they are delusional liars, why do we trust them to lead us to God? To put people in jail and to protect our way of life? Why are their words and actions good enough for that? But when it comes to experiencing something out of the ordinary, something fascinating, something possibly terrifying, they become a fool, a joke, an idiot. Not here. We are the Big Dog T2B. Welcome to the show. Hello everyone, my name is Jack and welcome to Big Dog T2B. As usual, we have the founder of the Big Dog T2B, Nathan Bowling, with us tonight. How you doing, Nate?
Oh, I'm doing good, Jack. If I'd look better, I could stand it. Oliver, shut up.
Well, tonight we're going to do things a little bit differently. Before we introduce our guest, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We'd like to recognize some of the folks that made comments on our last episode, episode 3. Those people would include Bigfoot Mary. Thank you very much, Mary. Percival Jenkins. Chuck Slabs from Oklahoma Chasing the Beast. Jay Ward. Thank you very much, Jay. Kat Bigfoot Saw Me Too. What a wonderful lady. Thank you very much, Kat. Cajun Jules. Awesome comment. Thank you very much for the praise. We love praise, but we also welcome constructive criticism. And Jeremy Harris. Thank you very much, Jeremy. And Hayden H. We'd like to hear more about your brother, Hayden. If you want to, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Tonight's guest is Michael. Michael also hails from the great state of Virginia. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing okay.
Good to hear it. So Michael had an encounter when he was a younger man, quite a few years ago. Before we get into that, Michael, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a married father of 5. I'm 48. I was 18 when all this happened. Was definitely a skeptic. I was a woodsman. You know, I stayed in the woods hunting and fishing all my life. I thought, you know, back in the 80s before the internet, I thought Bigfoot was a thing up in Washington State or Canada. I had no idea how wrong I really was. But that night, you know, it changed a lot of people forever. I'm one of them. Yeah, I was definitely a skeptic.
Why don't you tell me what happened that led up to your sighting?
Well, it was myself, 6 friends of mine. We was all, you know, somewhat close in age, around the 18-mile mark, except for one. He was the drunkest of all of us. You know, everybody had decided that they wanted to drink. So I volunteered to drive. You know, I figured I could get a little drinking in after later on that night after everything calmed down some, and I got parked. I hadn't had my license long, and I didn't want to lose it. But we decided to go out to a place that's real rural. It's on a game management area, White Oak Mountain game management area here in Pennsylvania County where I live. And we went to a place that, you know, the place has got 12 ponds on it. I've been fishing out there several times, but this spot particular, we hadn't been there but probably a handful of times. It was so deep down in there that we got to the real good ponds way before we ever got to this spot. We just decided that night we did a little four-wheeling. I mean, nothing major, just having fun, and settled on this one particular place to just pull over and everybody get out and drink, I guess. It was hot. I remember that. It's one of those nights that it's so hot you remember it. The moon was either full or pretty much full. If it wasn't full, it was pretty close. You know, we had a little ambient light to see. You know, we just pulled over and everybody got out and We had the radio going, nothing really loud. We didn't want to have to scream over it, but we had a fishing trip coming up, a big one, and going out to some trophy catfish. And we was just discussing tactics, talking a little trash to one another, just what young kids do. I mean, it was pretty much a normal night. We'd been there probably, I want to say, I know memory don't serve well, you get this far out, but I want to say probably about a half an hour, give or take. And all of a sudden, I mean, we heard a huge crash. It was either something, well, let me digress. Let me back up just a little bit. It was, a buddy of mine had made a comment that night. It was unusually quiet that night, because he said something about it. We didn't hear a lot of normal stuff we normally hear, like the frogs and the whippoorwills and cicadas. Virginia's flooded with cicadas in the summertime, and he had made a comment that night that it was real quiet down there, and I didn't pay much attention to it at the time. I was actually glad, because you don't want to have to hollow that talking. But anyway, we heard a huge crash, and it sounded like it was about 50, 75 yards deep, directly behind me. And immediately after the crash, which I don't know if it was something fell out of a tree or a tree got pushed over. It could have been either one of those two. But we started hearing footsteps, and I mean heavy ones. And it was bipedal. I've heard about everything walking in the woods on 2 and 4 legs, and at first we thought it was a man. But why on earth would a man be in a tree way out in the middle of nowhere, 11 o'clock at night? And right after this, we heard the footsteps. It started making like a grunting, growling sound. It sounded a little agitated. It was nothing paranormal at that. I mean, it was weird, but I mean, nothing that would make you, question your sanity or anything. It was very unusual, and it was very guttural. It was deep. I mean, deep. It kind of moved away from us at first. It kind of put me at a little bit of an ease, because it wasn't moving towards us. It was starting to move away from us. And I had a 1 million candle power spotlight, and this is 89, so it was before LED. This was halogen. It was one of the old ones that had like a telephone cord on it. You plugged into your cigarette lighter. And I plugged it up, and I kept throwing light, trying to get a eyeball on it, and it kept hitting kudzu. It was so thick right there that it was blowing the light right back in my face and blinding me. I mean, I could see less after using the light than I could before I done it. I didn't do that, but a couple of times trying to light it up. It gradually moved in somewhat of a semicircle. It worked its way down to probably about 100, 150 yards down behind us. And right before we actually got a visual with this thing, it cut loose with a roar / scream / howl. If you could take all those decibels and put them into one action, it was a little bit of everything, and I had never heard anything like it. And it was very unnerving. It scared us to death. I mean, I am surprised it didn't break the windows in the truck. It was that loud. It's so loud it almost distorts your vision. I mean, it vibrates you. Immediately after the roar, that's when it stepped out into the open. About, like I said, about 100, 150 yards down behind us. But when it stepped out, I hit it with the light. And, oh my God, I mean, my life, our life, all of us changed that instant. Right then, it changed forever. It was huge. I mean, it was 8 to 8.5 feet in height, probably 4 to 4.5 feet wide, massive forearms. I think every time I think about that thing, I think about Popeye, the way his forearm, it reminds you of that. The forearms are just ridiculous. And it was rocking. left, right, left, right. When I hit it with the light, I got some eye shine off of it. It was greenish yellow kind of eye shine. Time almost stood still at that point. It was just a matter of a few seconds, I suppose, or, maximum 15 seconds at the most. I had it in the light rocking. And when it made that last rock to the right, it lunged towards the road. Let me put this in perspective. We were in its 2 o'clock position, 30 feet higher than it was, and about 100 to 150 yards away. It had about a 30-foot embankment to make it up to the road that we was parked on. It made that in about 3, at the most 4 steps. I have never seen anything that could move like this thing could move. I mean, it was mind-boggling. It defies everything you ever thought was normal. Normal don't exist anymore. Normal is gone. And when it made that move, we all panicked. I mean, all of us, we all panicked. I mean, everybody was fighting for position. They were jumping in the back of the truck because, couldn't but a couple fit up in the cab. And we had a female with us. She would sneak out to be with her boyfriend, which was one of my other friends. We had picked her up earlier that night. Her parents had no idea that, she'd even left the house. That'll be important here in a minute. Everybody's scrambling, for position. I don't remember getting in the truck. I remember cranking the truck because I had the keys in the switch. We were listening to the radio, and, you had to have a key for the accessory. The keys were already in it, but it was a 5-speed truck, and it was in 4 high, and I was scared to death that I was going to stall it. So, I just floored it and popped the clutch. Took off spinning. I remember looking up when I went to second gear, looking up in the rear view, and I could see its torso, and this is a lifted Toyota 4-wheel drive. I mean, it's up off the ground a little bit, and, this thing's got to be tall for you to catch torso like that in the rear view. I mean, it covered that distance, that 100, 150 yards, man, in just a matter of seconds. I mean, unbelievably fast. And when I went to second gear, I remember my buddy hollering. It bounced off. My buddy that owned the truck, which he was the oldest, he was the one he had a lot too much to drink, but he set up mobile homes for a living. And this was a 30-ton bottle jack, pump jack that they used to set these mobile homes on block with. And my other buddy, the one that was dating her, hit it with the jack, and the jack just had no effect whatsoever. I mean, that would have very minimum, a regular man would have took him slap off his feet, maybe even been fatal, because that jack weighs about 30 pounds. And it had no effect whatsoever. I mean, none. And I remember putting my eyes back on the road, and I almost lost it. I was coming through a curve, and I remember thinking, oh, my God, I can't wreck this truck. Because if I do, we're down here with it. So I didn't look back anymore. Anyway, luckily I didn't wreck it. We left there, and, the hardest part of this whole deal after leaving, of course, going through it was the hardest part. But other than that, was we had to take this girl home in that condition to her parents, who had no idea she had ever even left the house, and explain to these people what had happened, and explain to them why their little girl was so upset. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And naturally, her father didn't believe us. And to be honest with you, if it was my daughter, I probably wouldn't have believed us neither. Our lives changed that day. And we've stayed in touch somewhat. A couple of them have passed on, including her. She never was really right again after that. if it ever came up, and we tried not to talk about it around her, because if it came up around her, she would just lose it. She ended up dying of overdose. I don't think she ever was right again. And, but, a couple of them have passed on, and others have moved away. But I kept this all quiet for 30 years because, back then there was no internet. I mean, all it was books. And I knew what we saw resembled a Sasquatch, but the thing was white. And I did not think, I always, for some reason, was thinking, Sasquatch is brown or black. I mean, I had no idea that white was even possible. So, a lot of years, with the first 7 years, I spent in complete denial. I really did. I tried to convince myself that it didn't happen. And I settled into substance abuse. I ended up with a real bad drinking problem, like I never got rid of. Thank God I finally did. We all changed forever that night. I really wish we'd have had internet back then, because if we did, it would have made information. So information is crucial. When you go through something like that, you can't have enough information. I mean, for 30 years, I read everything I could get my hands on about Sasquatch. And just in the past decade, I started seeing that, hey, man, these things are white. People are seeing them white. And eventually, feeling that is eventually what made me come forward and get it off my chest. And to be honest with you, it was the best thing I ever done. Every time I talk about it, I feel a little bit better. I never thought I would. I was always worried what everybody else would think. And I just wish I'd have done this a long time. If I'd have had that information back then that I have now, I believe I'd be a lot further in my recovery than what I am at the present time. But it was traumatic, and I don't know. I'm trying to come to grips with it, and it's to this day. I mean, that don't just happen, but I don't know. It happened to us for some reason. I tried to figure out what we did to provoke it. I don't know what we done to make it angry at us. We weren't cutting up, or we weren't even really being loud. I mean, some laughing maybe, but I don't know. I don't know what made it so aggressive. That's pretty much what happened.
That's a hell of a story, Michael.
Yeah.
Was this the first time that you went to this?
No, I've been there. We've been there a handful of times, just exploring. When we went to that place, we were fishing. When we went to that place, we was getting on the crappie. We went down there pretty much to crappie fish. So, I've been down there exploring. It was 12 ponds down there. One of them, the biggest one, they've drained it now. It's called Peach Pond, and they've drained it now. I think that thing was about 70 acres, but I went all over it in four-wheel drive exploring, finding ponds and stuff like that. But this particular spot, I hadn't been there but a handful of times. And then I never really stopped there. It was just in passing, coming up out of the woods. It was a kind of a trailhead right there. You could come in on four-wheel drive without, hanging the axles up. We'd come out right there, and I don't know, it just seemed like the place to go that night for some reason.
So how many times have you been back there at night and stopped and, had a few drinks, or, just kind of hung out and had some social time with your friends?
That was the first time.
Huh.
I had never been, usually after dark, we was out of there around dark because, the crappie fishing, I know some people use crappie lights, but we didn't have a boat. We was doing it from the bank. We'd go down there and get on the crappie, during the day. We never had a whole lot of call to stay there after dark.
So this was your first time there at night. You're there with your friends, and you're, doing the normal friendly thing, and you got a young lady with you, and you said you were listening to music. What kind of music were you listening to?
AC/DC, Back in Black. I'll never forget it. Every time that song comes on, I think about it.
If you didn't speak English and you weren't an AC/DC fan, that's probably not what we would call friendly noises coming out of that radio, even if it wasn't real loud.
It's not a very soothing music, but we hear that a lot, that people don't realize that they are white Bigfoot. First one I ever saw was white. And here they're quite common. But the thing about, you was asking what you did to provoke it, probably nothing, except maybe the music. I think their personalities are as widespread as people's personalities. He may have just been a jerk in the first place.
I agree with that.
So you had a 1,000,000 candle power light, and it lit up the kudzu in front of you and nearly blinded you. And I have a TN42 flashlight. It's a really powerful flashlight. At 100 yards on a white light, I should have got the amber light. It'll wash all of the color out of something. Is there any chance that what you saw, you'd wash the color out of it? Could you see the color and the other stuff around it? Or was that just, it was absolutely white? It was even white when it got close to you.
I thought about that, actually, because, back then was halogen. And, halogen's got that little bit of yellow tint to it. And I've wondered through these years if it couldn't have been real light gray, because, once that thing got close, I know the rear view look was the one look I got, and I didn't want to wreck the truck, so I never looked back again. But could it have been light gray? Absolutely, because it was dingy looking. It wasn't clean by any means or any stretch. Now, we didn't smell anything. We didn't have anything thrown at us. The aggression that it portrayed is the only aggression we saw. But it was extremely light in color. I mean, extremely light. I have a fellow I just learned about here recently that had a sighting 6 miles away from where I had mine. The one he described as a dirty blonde. And this happened in 2016. And I did find out that they had another sighting there in 92 that scared a man so bad that he sold his property. He never went back. I knew his daughter real good. And went to his Christmas parties, and this guy, he sold his land. This little stuff I've heard through the years, I didn't say nothing to nobody. I just kept my mouth shut and, trying to learn. But yeah, it could have been light gray or something of that nature.
So you lit it up, and it's coming across the field. It's got to cover 100, 150 yards. It's got to come up 30 feet in elevation. And you said it covered that in about 6 to 10 seconds, something like that?
Yeah, in that neighborhood. I learned when me and you was talking, before we went on the air, when we talked the last time, that you kind of lose a sense of time when something traumatic happens to you. And I didn't realize that little exercise you had me do, how distorted it actually became. But yeah, if I had to guess, 10 seconds is in the ballpark, give or take.
Adrenaline is only your friend in situations like that.
Yeah, I agree.
When you've got to get out, and adrenaline does funny things. It'll put blank spots in your memory. It'll make time just stop and stand still. You get in a car accident and things slow down and you can see something coming to you, and it just seems like it takes forever to get there, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
I never knew fear until that night. That's a primal fear. It was so bad that 3 of us lost control of our bladders. 3 of them. I did not know fear existed until that night. And I haven't experienced anything like it since. I've been diagnosed clinically with PTSD, severe anxiety. I'm on a number of medications, have been since. I did not know that level of fear was even possible.
God bless you, brother.
Thank you.
Are you all right with this? Keep going with this? If we need to take a break or we need to do another show, that's fine with us.
No, I'm fine. I'm through the worst part now. I was going to go in. We went back the next day, and it was really against my better judgment. But my buddy had to have that jack for his business. And this was on Sunday. He wasn't like he could go nowhere back then on Sunday and get another one. He had a job coming up Monday morning, so we went back down now to get the jack. And I had noticed a limb that was right next to its head when I lit it up the night before. And I used that limb. I got down there where it was at, and you could see where it was standing. And you could see where it dug in the bank going up the hill. You could see the steps. It was 3 or 4. I want to say 1 short and 3 long ones. But it was, you could see where it dug in and went up the bank. But, you know, we had been in a drought for a pretty good while, and the forest floor was just hard as concrete, you know, and it full of pine needles, and, you know, then you had the gravel road. But the only tracks I saw were where it came up the embankment to the road. And one thing that happened that when we went back, I've never understood, was the jack was 100 yards away from where it was thrown out at. I don't know if it got mad and threw it, or if it played with it, or investigated it, or we found it after taking some time walking. I mean, it was red, you know. If it weren't red, if it was any color, you know, flat colors, we'd have never found it. But we found it about 100 yards away from where it was thrown out at. But that branch was about 8.5 feet off the ground, and its head was almost parallel with it when I lit it up. So I used that as kind of my scale. Its head was right there at that branch, and I'm 6'3". That branch was at about 8.5 foot. I don't have no idea what it weighed. I mean, I wouldn't even speculate on what it weighed. It was big.
Well, weight is a hard measure. Nate's got some experience in that. And my personal way of guessing weight is I look at something and I say, well, how many of me would it take to make that thing? If you were to guess at that, how many of you would it take to make that creature?
At least 3. And I'm 250.
Whew.
6'3" and 250.
Whew. That's a bunch of thing on the hoof.
Oh yeah, I mean, when it stepped with authority. I mean, we heard it. We heard every step it took. I mean, it was a thump. I mean, it was extremely heavy-footed. I mean, I've done a lot of reading here lately, and a lot of people are talking about how quiet they were. This thing wasn't quiet at all. You'd have to have been deaf not to hear it. And then when it started running, you could hear it. I mean, every step it took, it did it with authority. It was heavy.
Well, that was a message, in my opinion. It's the same message that you give when you're in the house. You can walk in the house and you don't want to be heard, nobody's going to hear you. But if you're not happy and you want somebody to know you're coming, how are you walking?
You're going to stomp.
There you go. And that's sending a message.
They can be as quiet as they want to. They're soft-footed. Most of the thermals that we have on our YouTube channel, well, I never knew they were there. And some of them were very close to me. It's a hard thing to swallow that something that big can get that close to you without you ever knowing it's there. And they absolutely can. This is to your credit. Many people keep this bottled up for the rest of their life, and it affects them. And my suggestion is, and you tell me what you think about this now that you're to the point you are, my suggestion is get it off your chest. Talk to somebody about it. Sometimes if they don't even have any input about it, still it helps to talk.
I feel better every time I talk about it. I've started a couple of Facebook pages. One of them specifically a support group for people who've had aggressive encounters. I won't say violent. I could, because I sense violence all off this thing, but I'll say aggressive. You know, I started that group just for people that's had aggressive encounters to have some kind of safe haven to talk to one another. And because, man, for 30 years, I wish so much that I just had, I mean, I talked to my family about it, of course, but very little. They believe me. I mean, they know me. Of course they believe me. But, you know, they couldn't offer no advice. You know, I can't say they related. They couldn't relate because they'd never been through it. And that support group is taking off kind of quick. It surprised me. I thought it was going to be a slow grow, but, you know, it's taken off pretty quick.
I'd like to ask a couple more questions about this creature. So, 8.5 feet tall, white or dingy gray, somewhere in the neighborhood of 750 pounds, forearms like Popeye. When it was standing, was it standing up straight? Was it crouched down and then came out? Can you tell me anything about that, about how it moved and the way it stood?
When the light hit it, like it was leaning forward a little bit, if that makes any sense. It didn't look like to me, because that was one of the other things that it spooked me a little bit with the height of it, because I don't think that thing was standing straight up. Matter of fact, that thing, it looked like it was leaning forward, and there was no neck whatsoever. You imagine some of these football players with shoulder pads on. Imagine 2 pairs of them shoulder pads, and the head fit a little down in it. I didn't see any neck whatsoever, but it didn't have real good posture. It looked like to me that it was like a person leaning over carrying something, kind of, if that makes any sense. It didn't have good posture at all. It was kind of leaned over a little.
So it comes up, clears the bank. You guys are leaving. You hit it with a pump jack, and you have to take this little girl home. If you brought my little girl home with 6 guys and she's hysterical, you might end up on the wrong side of a gun. I can see how that would be. That would be pretty traumatic in itself, and that'd be the second hardest thing of the night. How did the father react? What specifically did he say? Let me ask that question a different way. What did the little girl say to her dad?
To tell you the truth, when she first got out of the truck, she was just, you know how when a baby cries, they get the sniffles and they can't speak. It's just all stutter when they're trying to talk. So that's what she was doing. And we tried to explain to this man what had happened and why she was, nobody had hurt her. She was just scared. Her mom had come back out and told him. She told her mama that we didn't do nothing to her. She said she told her mama she was scared that we had seen something. We didn't do anything to her. She let them know that she saw something. And he said, well, what did you see? And I was trying to explain to this man, and I've got daughters too. I've got 4 of them. And I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't have believed it. I would not for 1 minute believe my story. I wouldn't believe it. Nope. But it was the truth. And I was giving the man the truth. And when I first started telling him, he had his arms crossed. He was looking at the ground, shaking his head. His language was very colorful. I'm not going to repeat it because we're on the air, but he just kept saying, oh, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And, I thought the man was going to call the law, but the girl, her mama went in there with her and managed to coax, I guess, enough information out of her to put them at ease somewhat, I guess. I don't know. I mean, that's where we left it. I kept waiting, to be honest with you, I kept waiting for the law to show up, and they never did. But she managed to get out to her mama that we didn't do anything to her to hurt her, that she had seen something and she didn't know what it was. We didn't know what it was. All we could tell a man was we saw something big and white on 2 legs. We didn't know what we saw. Sasquatch, up to this point in my life, I was a skeptic. I've been in the woods all my life. I had never seen nothing like that. I had heard Bigfoot stories, Legend of Boggy Creek and all, and I thought that was a thing in the Pacific Northwest. I had no idea that it could exist right here in Virginia. No idea. And the color of it made it even 10 times worse. I mean, was it a spirit? You think white, you think ghost. For a long time, I was wondering if it was something spiritual. But, spirits wouldn't have moved and thumped and made the racket this thing made, and the sound, it was very unnerving. That now, seeing it, specifically one that's been seen in Pennsylvania that really looks like what we saw. And, I can handle looking at that. But when I hear those Ohio screams, it makes my stomach turn. The sound was as traumatic is seeing it, if that makes any sense at all. Hearing it was just as frightening as seeing it, because we didn't see it when we heard it. We seen it after we heard it. But that initial scream, I didn't know I could jump that high.
Oh, I absolutely understand that. My thing that kicked this off for me, and like you, it wasn't until years later that I really looked into anything. I never saw it. There's a big, huge part of me that wishes that I had, because I wouldn't think that I'm crazy today. But not seeing it, I think to a great degree for me was worse. You know, there's just something out there, and I don't know what it is, and it really sounds like it wants to come get me.
I can understand that. Being that I heard it, I can fully relate to that, because if we'd have never made a visual on it, you know that thing don't sound like nothing you've ever heard in them woods. The minute you hear it, you know that's different. This doesn't belong here.
I got a question about the appearance of the creature. Can you tell us anything about the facial features? Could you tell much about that when you put the light on it? Generally, you focus on one thing, being the size or the no neck, or something stands out to you, and sometimes when that stands out, you miss other things. But I was wondering, can you tell us anything about the face?
I've never had good vision. Diabetic, sugar has done a lot of damage to my eyes. Now then, I was 18, but still, the diabetes had done some damage. I wore glasses, Structurally, I remember the eyes were real deep set and they were far apart. And by deep set, I mean this thing had to have some kind of brow ridge for those eyes to be that deep in its skull. But as far as facial features or teeth, or I wouldn't even want to speculate, because that would be pure speculation, and I don't want to do that. I mean, I'm just trying to give you guys the facts, and the fact is, no, I mean, I could see the eye shine. I could see that the eyes were really deep set. I could see it didn't have the real conical hair like I've seen on some of the other ones. It was conical, but it wasn't real conical. It was rounded off some. The one in Pennsylvania that I've seen is just about the spitting image of it. That's as close as you get. So a white Bigfoot that filmed in Pennsylvania.
My reason for asking that was, from my personal experience, now they tell me there are 4 types. I have seen 2 types. One has a very human-looking face with a flat, wide nose, but hooded. The main difference in a human face and it's a significant amount of distance between the bottom of the nose and the upper lip. And then I've seen a type that it's got a protruding muzzle and canine teeth. And from my experience in the last 2 years, I've had quite a bit of experience with these 2 groups in one particular situation. And the ones with the human type face tend to be less aggressive and more curious. The interactions you have with them will be less traumatic. The ones with the muzzle tend to be more aggressive, just sort of seem to maybe be too bold, and they're quicker to act, and the others tend to be more curious and sit back and watch you.
I don't remember a muzzle. Its face was fairly flat, and from what I remember, it didn't have a grotesquely wide nose. It nothing that stood out. What I saw had a human aspect to it. I don't know how much, but it had a human aspect to it. I don't remember any muzzle. I don't remember any sharp teeth.
According to what I've been told, that sounds like basically a type 1, which would be the fatty type, so I'm told. I'm really glad that you've reached out and that you're starting to move forward with this, because it sounds like a very traumatic thing and a very heavy part of your life. Has it made you less likely to go out fishing and hunting and things of that nature?
Oh, no, absolutely. No, it changed that. I love to fish, And I still do fish, but if I do, I'm near a busy road. I'm near people. I do not put myself out there alone. I don't put myself out there deep, period. I don't go deep in the woods no more. Nothing like I did through my teen years. I mean, man, I'd walk 2 or 3 miles down in the woods to hunt. Yeah, I mean, that was nothing. I didn't mind. I mind, after I kill something, how to get it out of there. But I tried to stay somewhere where we could get the truck to it. But I wanted to show my kids that life, and I haven't been able to do it. I don't know if I will be able to do it ever. I'm not that comfortable with it, and I don't know if I ever will be. That part of me died that night. That's one of the things that I really, really miss the most.
What I would say in regards to that is, for all those years prior to your encounter, and all the time you spent in the woods hunting and fishing, I would dare say that many times they were probably close to you. You probably had been among them and not knew it. And that was the aggressive encounter that you had. That is an uncommon thing, because I've been in close proximity to them several times, and I have never had an encounter that aggressive, though I've talked to many people who have. I would say it's therapeutic to get back out there a little bit at a time. People go into the wilderness where there's grizzly bears. Grizzly bears are one of the most dangerous animals on the planet. The difference is we know grizzly bears exist. We know they're there. We've known about them all our lives. So when you go there, you're prepared for that. When you go into the woods in Virginia, in your mind, the worst thing you have to encounter would be a black bear, maybe a mountain lion. And then you see something like this that's not supposed to exist. Yet they do. And they've been there all along. And you've probably been in the woods with them before. You may not have seen them, but they've probably seen you. And they didn't hurt you. Now you should be safer than you were then, because you know they exist. You know they're there. You will look for them. I would suggest go armed. But I would suggest, for your peace of mind, a little bit at a time. Don't overdo it, but step back out there and reclaim your life rather than let it take something that matters to you. It's already took enough from you. And Jack and I will be available anytime that you might want to call us, because they've been there all along. And how many times do you actually hear of them hurting somebody? I'm not saying they're not dangerous. They most definitely are in certain situations. But they're not the only dangerous animal on the planet. They're probably not even the most dangerous in the woods where they are, because for the most part, they want nothing to do with you. Don't let it take from you something you love.
Yeah, it would have to be definitely baby steps. I guess ignorance was bliss. Me being ignorant to them being there was blissful, because now I know. And what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, it really does. I mean, Jack said something about I was more likely to get struck by lightning 3 times and go through that again. And I like that analogy. I like those odds. I'm working towards that. I mean, just here recently, in the past 6 months, I've came forward and I'm talking about this thing, and I've been in therapy for 25 years and got nothing out of it like I've got out since I've came forward. Every time I speak about it, it's therapy. I even, have a white Bigfoot as my profile picture on Facebook, because I want to face the fear. I want to get past that fear. And I am working on it. I really am. Baby steps, yeah. I mean, I could see it maybe happening over a course of, 12 to 36 months. But it's going to take time. It's definitely going to take time, because I'm very uneasy.
God bless you, brother. Another thing for perspective, given the size and the speed and the strength of this thing, and you had 6 people there with you, if it wanted to harm one of them, do you think it could have?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I honestly think if that's what it wanted, it wouldn't have been no circling. The minute we heard the crash, it would have been on top of us, and that truck would have been the only thing they found. If that thing wanted us, it would have had us. I saw this thing move, and I saw how big it was. If it wanted us, absolutely. We wouldn't be here.
Another thing about this is we don't say anything negative about anyone. And this isn't saying anything negative about anyone. It's just for perspective. But there's a guy out there. You said you were good friends with him. And he's a big old boy. He's a big old boy like you are. In his particular situation, he hunted and fished and did it on this one piece of property for a lot of years. And he responded pretty much in the same way you did as far as not going back in the woods. He sold everything he owned. He would go out to this place and he'd spend weekends, weeks out there hunting, doing what he did, enjoying what he did. And he encountered one of these things. It was within at least 100 yards, probably a lot closer than that. And it mean mugged him. It gave him the stare. And just that for that guy was enough for him to say, nope, I'm not doing this anymore. The way I remember his story is that he sold all of his hunting equipment. He described a lot of very nice, expensive hunting equipment. So I wouldn't be self-conscious about the way that you responded to the equivalent of an attack, which, in my estimation, was an extreme bluff charge. Going back through the thing, you had 6 people out there. One of them was a young lady. You went into an area where you hadn't been before at night. You started drinking and having a good time, playing AC/DC Back in Black, and you didn't know that you were in somebody's front yard. An old boy got mad about you being in his front yard and doing that thing, and he stomped around. And when you didn't leave from the communication of him stomping around, he screamed. And when you didn't leave when he screamed, he stepped out. And you didn't leave. So he sat over there and he got himself all worked up, rocking back and forth. And he decided to take a run at you, and then you decided to leave. But he probably at this point was pissed off enough that he needed some insurance. He needed to go ahead and drive that nail home. And he ran after you. Do you think he could have caught that truck if he wanted to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he did. He was close enough for me to see his torso in the rear view. Yeah, he caught that truck.
You know, for me, I have to say if these things exist because I've never seen one. I believe he was trying to prove a point, and I believed he proved it, because I'm guessing none of you guys, other than to get that pump jack, ever went back out there again. So from his aspect, mission accomplished.
Yeah, it definitely worked.
And most wild animals, they'll do those things. Dogs will do those things. Bears are more violent. But a lot of their communication is a lot of noise, and it's superficial contact. And if I have to roll you over and pin you, that's bad. More times than not, one or the other of them will turn and run. And as soon as it runs, the other one will chase it for a little while and make a stand, make a statement of basically don't come back. The other animal goes off and is humble. And that's communication in the wild, every day, all day, between everything from mice to bears. We just don't speak that language on a day-to-day basis. Does that sound possible?
Oh, yeah, I understand. He got his point across.
But to Nate's point, at your own speed, to your own gratification, and to your own level of comfort, when and if you can go out and do that thing, because it sounds like you have a lot of regret about not being able to spend that time with your family. And regret will eat you up just about as fast and just about as much as anything else in your life. And you've been through enough already. To everything in life, there's a balance. you're the only one that knows where the fulcrum point is. So God bless you, brother. You've got my number. We'll get you Nate's number. Anytime you need to talk, anytime you go out, you can send us a geotag, and we'll know where you are. And if you don't get back in contact with us when you're supposed to, we're going to send somebody to come look for you. And you're not that far from me. Chances are I'll be on the way.
That sounds good, man.
That's something that we do for each other. I guess what I'm saying is you learned about being in the woods, though you didn't know these things exist. You have the ability to give your children a tool that your parents didn't give you because you know they exist. Prepare your children for the wilderness and what you know is in it, because nature is a wonderful thing. It was put there by God for us to enjoy. These creatures, all animals, were created by the same person, or the same thing that created us. They've been there all along. And like Jack said, he'll get you my number. You've got his number. We'll help you through this if we can.
I appreciate that. That's more than I've had in 30 years. That's a good little peace of mind to have.
Well, if you go to our website, it's one of the first things you'll read. Welcome home. We treat everybody with respect. We support them as much and as often and whenever we can. I've answered the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning. It really don't matter. But we're starting to run up on about an hour, and that's about as much as our listeners can usually put up with. So at this point, I'll ask Nate, you got anything else, Nate?
I just want to say that this has really been an enjoyable thing to have him on and to hear this story, because the effect that it had on him, that's real. And there's so many people out there that have had this same experience that still have not come forward. So by what you've done here tonight, if somebody hears that and takes that next step to coming out with their story and making the progress that you have made, then we get A+ on this show. We've done what we set out to do. If this helped another person come to where you are now by you telling your story, you've done a great thing. And we appreciate it.
I appreciate having somebody to talk to about it. I mean, your average Joe, you bring up something like that, your next ride's in a padded van. It's good to have an outlet like you guys to vent this stuff, because the venting it has gave me more therapy than I've got out of clinics in 25 years. Just venting it and being able to, you know what, this happened to me. It's time I own it. I got to deal with it. And I've got to move past it, because it's owned me long enough. I mean, it really has. It's owned me long enough. And I ain't a quitter. I'll fight till I can't breathe no more. And this ain't nothing different.
That's right. And to be able to say that brought you a long way.
It's a deal.
Well, my final note to add is there are a lot of parks in big cities. If you look at the data, it doesn't show parks in big cities. These are wooded areas. They look, feel, smell like real wilderness. If you wanted someplace to start where you could walk through, get accustomed to those sights and smells and sounds again, I would probably start there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if it's going to happen, it's going to have to be in baby steps, like Nate said, for sure. Because if I go out there and overwhelm myself, I'll be back to square one.
And nobody wants that. Well, I guess that about wraps it up. Remember, if you decide to step off the pavement, you decide to step off the trail, you get back there into places where people normally don't go. As we learned tonight, particularly at times that people don't go there, You need to be mentally, physically, emotionally prepared for what you may encounter. God bless you. We love you. Take care. And until next time, have a good evening.